Let's be honest, the most dangerous mistake a man makes is believing a woman's silence means absence of feeling, because sometimes the woman who acts the calmest is fighting the hardest war inside herself. You think she doesn't like you because she isn't chasing, she isn't confessing, she isn't making dramatic moves, but female attraction rarely announces itself the way male attraction does. It hides, it watches, it studies, and if you miss one sign, you walk away from someone who is emotionally locked onto you. Here's the truth nobody told you. When a woman is mildly interested, she enjoys your attention. When she is deeply invested, she starts tracking your existence. Not in an unhealthy way, not obsessively in the extreme sense, but psychologically, you begin occupying mental space she never planned to give away. Watch this carefully. You mention a random detail once. Maybe it was your favorite late-night snack, a song from high school, a dream you had years ago. Weeks later, she remembers it. Not because she has perfect memory, because emotionally invested people archive details. Men often think attraction is visible through flirting. Women often reveal it through retention. She remembers what mattered to you because you started mattering to her. And here's where most men ruin it. They dismiss it. She's just nice. No, nice people remember birthdays. Emotionally attached people remember the sentence you forgot you ever said. There's another sign. She appears where your energy exists. You post something, she notices. You disappear, eventually she reappears. You speak less, she finds subtle ways to reconnect. Not aggressively, not desperately, just enough to remain inside your orbit. Because when a woman is emotionally affected by a man, distance becomes uncomfortable. She doesn't always chase the man. She chases the feeling she had around him, and that feeling keeps pulling her back. But the strongest sign, her emotional reactions become disproportionate. Your absence affects her more. Your attention means more. Your approval lands deeper. Why? Because emotional investment changes emotional weight. A text from anyone means nothing. A text from you changes her mood. Now listen carefully because this is where mature men separate themselves from boys. Do not weaponize this. Do not test her. Do not disappear to force reactions. Real confidence never manipulates affection. The goal is not making someone emotionally dependent. The goal is recognizing genuine connection when it quietly arrives, because many men spend years chasing loud attraction while missing silent devotion. The loud woman gets attention, the quiet woman who notices everything gets forgotten. And sometimes, she was the one carrying you in her mind long after conversations ended. You thought she moved on. She still remembered the jacket you wore the first day. You thought she forgot. She remembered the exact moment you laughed without trying to impress anyone. You thought she lost interest. Meanwhile, she was trying to lose feelings. That is different, very different. A woman who isn't interested moves away easily. A woman emotionally attached often stays longer than logic allows. Not physically, mentally, emotionally, internally. And if you notice that she remembers your world better than people who have known you for years, stop assuming she feels nothing, because sometimes the woman saying the least is feeling the most. Most men completely misread emotional signals because they're looking for performance instead of patterns. They expect clarity where women operate in subtlety. They expect confession where emotion is usually expressed through behavior, and because of that, they overlook the strongest indicators of genuine attachment. When a woman is not interested, her communication becomes efficient. Short replies, delayed responses, no curiosity about your inner world. But when she is emotionally invested, even if she's hiding it from herself, her communication starts to expand without permission. She asks unnecessary questions, not because she needs information, but because she wants continuation. She finds reasons to keep the interaction alive. A woman who is not interested ends the conversation. A woman who is emotionally affected prolongs it. Even when she says she's busy, she still returns. Not out of obligation, out of pull. Now listen closely. One of the most overlooked signs is inconsistency in control. She tries to act indifferent, then suddenly becomes overly engaged. She distances herself, then reappears warmer than before. This is not manipulation. This is internal conflict. Her emotional system is reacting faster than her logic can stabilize it. Because real attraction doesn't stay linear. It fluctuates between resistance and surrender. And if you're paying attention, you'll notice something else. She becomes subtly protective of how you see her. Not openly, not dramatically, but in small corrections. She wants to be seen correctly by you. A woman who doesn't care about a man does not care how he interprets her actions. But a woman who is emotionally involved starts managing perception. She will rephrase something she said earlier. She will clarify a message she already sent. She will wonder if she came off too cold or too eager. And here's what most men miss entirely. She remembers how she made you feel. Not just what she said, but your reaction, your silence, your delay in replying, your tone. She studies it. Because emotional investment turns observation into analysis. Now there is another layer most men never notice. Her curiosity shifts from surface to depth. At first, she asks basic questions. What do you do? What do you like? But when she's drawn in, the questions change. What shaped you? Why do you think that way? What don't people usually understand about you? That shift is not casual. That is emotional exploration. She is no longer just talking to you. She is trying to understand your inner structure. Because attraction is no longer about appearance. It becomes about psychological connection. And here is the part that confuses men the most. She may still appear calm, still social, still normal on the outside. But internally, you have become a reference point. Her mood subtly adjusts around your presence. Her attention automatically scans for you in a room, not in a dramatic way, in a habitual way, and habits only form when something has emotional weight. But I need you to be grounded here. None of this guarantees obsession. It indicates interest, emotional resonance, or developing attachment. Not ownership, not certainty, just signals. And signals are only useful if you interpret them with maturity. Because the biggest mistake men make is assuming emotional signals mean control over the outcome. They don't. They simply show that something real might be forming beneath the surface. And if you can recognize that without panic, without ego, without rushing, you begin to see women not as puzzles to solve, but as humans revealing themselves slowly in patterns they don't fully understand yet. The real truth most men never hear is this. When a woman is emotionally affected by you, she doesn't just interact with you differently, she starts experiencing you differently in her own private world. Let's be honest, attraction is not always visible in how she treats you in public. It's revealed in how she behaves when there is no audience. Because in public, people perform, but in private reactions, people reveal. A woman who is not invested in you stays emotionally neutral. She can see you, talk to you, leave you, and reset instantly. There is no emotional residue. But when she is emotionally attached, even slightly, you leave traces in her system. And that's where things get interesting. She starts replaying conversations, not because she's bored, because her mind is trying to decode emotional meaning. Did he mean that the way I think he meant it? Was that a joke? Or was there truth in it? Why did I feel different after that conversation? Men think women are overthinking, but often they are processing attachment signals. Now, listen carefully. One of the strongest indicators is emotional sensitivity to your tone. Not your words, your tone. When a woman is not emotionally invested, your tone is just sound. But when she is attached, your tone becomes emotional data. A slightly colder reply can affect her more than a long message. A delayed response can create more emotional activity than a compliment. Not because she is insecure, because emotional attachment amplifies perception. And here's where most men completely misunderstand her behavior. She may act fine, but internally, she is tracking emotional shifts. She notices when your energy changes. She notices when you're more distant than usual. She notices when you're slightly more engaged than before. And she adjusts accordingly, not always consciously, often instinctively, because female emotional intelligence is highly attuned to relational dynamics. But there is another layer even deeper than this. When she starts caring, she begins to imagine scenarios involving you, not fantasies in a childish sense, but predictive emotional simulations. What would it feel like if I lost access to him? What would it be like if he was with someone else? What would it mean if he stopped talking to me completely? These thoughts don't mean obsession. They mean emotional anchoring. You have become a possible lost scenario in her mind. And anything the mind can imagine losing, it begins to value differently. Now, here is something subtle but extremely important. She starts becoming more emotionally expressive in indirect ways, not always saying what she feels, but showing it in timing, in attention, in effort, in small acts of consistency. She may not confess anything, but she will stay present, and presence is one of the clearest signs of emotional investment, because people don't consistently remain where they feel nothing. They drift, they detach, they forget. But if she keeps circling back into your space, even after pauses, even after distance, that is not randomness. That is emotional continuity. Still, you must understand something critical. These signals are not ownership. They are not guarantees. They are not permission to assume certainty. They are simply indicators that your presence is affecting her internal world more than she expected. And when a man can observe that without ego, without rushing to label it, without trying to control it, he becomes rare. Because most men either ignore it completely or overreact to it completely. Both miss the point. The truth sits in the middle. Observation without assumption. Awareness without attachment. And if you can master that, you stop chasing confusion and start recognizing real emotional alignment when it quietly begins to form. One of the clearest signs she's emotionally affected by you is not what she says, it's what she protects. Because when a woman doesn't care, she has no emotional boundaries to manage around you. She is open, casual, and detached. But when she starts feeling something deeper, even if she's not ready to admit it, she becomes selective about what she reveals. Not distant, selective. And that difference is everything. She starts controlling how she appears in your eyes. She rethinks messages before sending them. She deletes and rewrites simple sentences, not because she's playing games, but because your perception now matters more than it should. And here's the part most men misunderstand. This isn't about manipulation. It's about emotional exposure. When someone begins to matter, the fear of being misunderstood increases, so she starts editing herself. Now listen closely. Another powerful sign is emotional comparison. She begins to subtly measure how you treat her versus how you treat others. She notices tone differences, response timing differences, energy differences, and even if she never says it out loud, she feels it. Because emotional investment makes people highly sensitive to relational ranking. Am I important to him or just another person in his world? That question doesn't come from insecurity. It comes from emotional attachment forming structure. Now, here's something very few men ever notice. She becomes slightly more reactive when you give attention elsewhere. Not jealousy in a loud, dramatic way, but micro shifts in mood, shorter replies, slight emotional withdrawal, or a sudden need to re-engage the conversation differently. And men often miss this because it doesn't look like jealousy. It looks like nothing changed. But emotionally, everything changed. Because attention is not just communication, it is positioning. And when she feels your attention shifting even slightly, her emotional system recalibrates. Now let's go deeper. A woman who is not emotionally invested does not monitor your availability, but a woman who is attached notices patterns. She knows when you usually reply. She knows when you're active. She knows when you're slower than usual, not because she is tracking you consciously, but because emotional relevance creates mental presence, and presence creates awareness. Now, here's a critical moment most men misinterpret. She may test emotional safety, not with obvious tests, but with vulnerability. She might share something personal at random, something slightly emotional, something deeper than normal conversation. And she watches your response, not your advice, not your words. Your emotional tone, because she is not just asking, what will he say? She is asking, is it safe to feel something here? And your reaction determines whether she opens more or closes slightly. But here's where maturity matters. If you treat every signal like confirmation, you lose clarity. If you treat every signal like manipulation, you lose connection. The truth requires balance, because what you are seeing is not control. It is emotional unfolding, and it can go in multiple directions depending on both people. Sometimes it grows. Sometimes it fades. Sometimes it pauses. But the key sign remains consistent. When she is emotionally affected by you, she does not remain unchanged around your presence. Something in her behavior shifts, even if she tries to hide it. And that shift is what most men either overlook or misunderstand completely. because real attraction doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it quietly changes how a person behaves when you are involved in their emotional world. When a woman is emotionally invested in you, one of the strongest signs is not what she adds to your life, but what she starts tolerating from you. And this is where most men get confused because they assume attraction means perfection. They think if she likes you, she will agree with everything. But real emotional attachment doesn't erase friction. It creates endurance. Now listen carefully. A woman who is not interested will exit at the first sign of emotional inconvenience. A delayed reply, a misunderstood message, a moment of distance. She disengages easily because there is no emotional cost. But when she is invested, she stays longer than logic suggests. Not because she is weak, but because emotional connection creates patience. And patience is not random. It is emotional value in action. Now here's something very important most men miss. She starts revisiting conflict differently. If there is tension between you, she doesn't just move on instantly. She replays it, she analyzes it. She tries to understand what it meant, not just what happened. Because emotional attachment turns simple events into meaningful events. And meaningful events require resolution in the mind. Even silence becomes a topic she thinks about. Now listen closely. Another subtle sign is emotional re-engagement after distance. A woman who is not invested forgets easily, but a woman who is emotionally connected returns after space. Not always immediately, not always directly, but she returns. Sometimes with a casual message, sometimes with a random reason, sometimes with a small interaction that looks insignificant on the surface. But underneath it is emotional reconnection because distance does not erase attachment, it only tests it. And if she keeps returning into your orbit after time apart, that is not coincidence. That is emotional continuity trying to restore connection. Now, here's where it gets even deeper. She becomes sensitive to your emotional state, not just your words, but your mood. She notices when you are off, when you are quieter than usual, when your energy feels different, and she responds to it. Sometimes by checking in, sometimes by adjusting her own energy, sometimes by trying to lift the interaction without being asked. And men often miss this completely because it doesn't come as a declaration, it comes as behavior. Now, listen carefully. One of the most overlooked signs is emotional investment in your growth. She starts caring about your direction, your mindset, your decisions, not in a controlling way, but in a way that shows emotional stake. Because when someone is just passing through your life, they don't care about your future. They care about the present interaction. But when someone is emotionally involved, your life trajectory starts to matter to them. Now, here's the truth most men never realize. She may never say, "I like you," directly, but she will show emotional investment through consistency, attention, return behavior, and sensitivity to your presence. And that combination is far more honest than words because words can be controlled, but emotional patterns are harder to fake over time. Still, you must stay grounded. None of this guarantees permanence. Feelings shift. Timing matters. Life influences everything. But what you are learning here is awareness, not control, not certainty. Awareness. Because when you can recognize emotional investment without overreacting to it, you stop misreading women who actually care. And you stop chasing women who never were emotionally present in the first place. And that clarity alone changes everything about how you move in relationships. The final truth about attraction is something most men never accept because it removes the fantasy of control. A woman can feel deeply, behave differently, even show emotional investment, and still not be yours, because emotion is not ownership, and interest is not commitment. Now listen carefully. When a woman is emotionally affected by you, there is one final pattern that reveals everything. She struggles with emotional distance from you, not in a dramatic way, but in a psychological way. She may try to step back, focus on her life, distract herself, act like she is fine, but something keeps pulling her attention back to you, not constantly, but repeatedly. That return is important, because people don't repeatedly return emotionally to something that means nothing. Now, here's what happens internally. She begins to associate you with emotional intensity, not chaos intensity. That means you have created a psychological imprint, a presence that doesn't fully disappear even when you are not present. And this is where men often misunderstand everything. They think the goal is to become unforgettable. But the truth is more subtle. The goal is to become emotionally coherent in her mind, not confusing, not chaotic, but meaningful enough that her mind keeps referencing you. Now listen closely. At this stage, she may start redefining how she feels. She might question her own reactions, she might downplay them, she might rationalize them, because emotional attachment often triggers internal negotiation. Do I actually feel something, or am I overthinking? Why does this person affect me like this? And this internal questioning is not resistance, it is emotional processing. Now, here is the final sign most men overlook. She doesn't fully replace you emotionally, even when she tries. Even when life moves forward, even when distractions appear, something about you remains in her emotional background. Not dominant, but persistent. And persistence is what separates casual attention from emotional imprint. Now let's bring this back to reality. None of this is a guarantee. None of this is a promise. None of this means you should chase, assume, or force outcomes, because the moment you try to control emotional responses, you lose authenticity. The real strength is in understanding without obsession, observing without assumption, and valuing yourself enough not to confuse attention with worth. Because the most dangerous trap for men is not rejection, it is misinterpretation, seeing signals where there are none, or ignoring signals where something real is forming. Both lead to the same outcome, emotional confusion, and clarity is what protects you from both. So, here is what I want you to take away. If she is emotionally affected by you, it will show in patterns, not promises, in consistency, not words, in return behavior, not declarations. But even then, your job is not to chase certainty. Your job is to stay grounded in your own value while you observe what unfolds naturally. Because real attraction doesn't need force, and real connection doesn't need confusion. It becomes obvious over time. Now, tell me this. What do you think is more powerful in today's dating world? A woman's words or her behavioral patterns? Drop your answer in the comments. And if this made you see things differently, like subscribe and share this with a friend who still thinks silence means she doesn't care.